seventh one. Seventh and last one, right? There are only 7 ahruf, only 7 variations. According, now I'm saying variations because that's now the term that Ibn al-Jazari is actually using. Is using ikhtilafat. Okay. 7, adding or removing letters or words. So here we have an example for some letters, an example for words. So now, so we have in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَوَصَّى بِهَا إِبْرَاهِيمُ بَنِيهِ وَيَعْقُوبُ. And the same word وَوَصَّى is also recited in some qira'at. If you're from Warsh, I noticed, I think Brother Muhammad or Brother Ali, you have some knowledge of Warsh. You know, we have وَأَوْصَى. Okay, it's read with an extra letter, pronounced وَأَوْصَى, and also this extra letter is also scribed in some of the masahif. So you'll have, if you have an added letter, or the opposite of added is the less letter. So if we look at the word وَوَصَّى, the first one, and then we look at وَأَوْصَى, we consider that وَأَوْصَى has an added letter. If we look at the word أَوْصَى, and then we go back to وَصَّى, we consider وَصَّى has a removed letter. So that's what's meaning. Yani one word will have more letters than the next one, okay? Or less letters than the next one. Is the meaning different? Depends on the scholars, but in general, in this example here, it's considered to have the same meaning. It's just different. The word used in Arabic is lughat. So one would be lughat Quraysh or al-Hijaz, and one would be lughat Bani Tamim. So how to translate a lugha? Is it a dialect? Maybe. It's the different tribes, what different tribes would in general use. Some of them would generally use وَوَصَّى with a tashdid, and some of them would generally use وَأَوْصَى, but it means the same thing. I don't know, is it dialect, Brother Ali? I'm not sure. That's why sticking with the word lugha. Okay, so here's where it comes in now, that some of these differences, we notice that there are differences along the tribal lines. Okay, this is, I think, the first time we mentioned that. Versus, let's go back a bit. يَقْتُلُونَ وَيَقْتَلُونَ, this is not a difference along tribal lines, or along articulation lines, or along anything. All Arabs would pronounce these words the same way, regardless of tribe, regardless of background, regardless of any kind of riwayat. These words are pronounced exactly the same way in every single qira'ah. But there's one is before the other. So that's very interesting, right? Minkum and minhum, articulate the same way along tribal lines. It's not a tribal thing. It's not a dialect. It's not a language. It's not structure. This is a difference that's beyond that. Basta and basta, yeah, that's a tribal line thing. Rahma and rahmat, yes. Different tribes would pronounce them differently and write them differently. So here, yes, you have some tribal lugha differences. So interpreting the ahruf as strictly a difference in lughat does not explain this, does not explain minkum and minhum, does not explain waqatalu wa qutilu. So that's why Ibn al-Jazari has a really strong point of view and strong interpretation. It's the most accepted one. Okay, so we're still on the 7th one, where again, wassa and awsa is a tribal difference, but they have the same meaning. Again, I want to make sure that everyone understands that it's both articulated differently and they were scribed differently. So the Masahif Uthmaniyya, which we'll get into, they were more than one mushaf. Some were scribed wa wassa, so a waw, waw, sad, and then the ya form. And some were scribed wa awsa, waw, alif form, waw, sad, ya form. Okay. Another example is the word sari'u in Surah Ali Imran, and the same ayah, the same word with a waw, wasari'u. Notice that one has a waw and one does not have at the beginning of the word. And also the Masahif Uthmaniyya, some of them had the set without a waw and some of them had it with a waw. Is this difference a tribal one? Absolutely not. Is it a dialect? No. Everyone pronounces these two words the same way. One has a wow, like an and one doesn't. So there isn't a linguistic explanation. It isn't a tribal one. This ayah would not be hard for any tribe to pronounce, whether with a wow or without. It doesn't make it easier. It's just different. Okay, subhanallah. So again, we're together in this journey, trying to comprehend this cans of information. What's cans? Treasure of information from Ibn al-Jazari. Another example is in Surah At-Tawbah. If you're Hafid of the Quran, you know that there's one ayah in the Quran that's tajri tahtaha al-anhar. And you know that it's that ayah in Surah At-Tawbah on the page, like almost a third or fifth to the end. It's the first ayah on the right, on the top, right? Yeah. That's in the majority of qira'at, but there are some qira'at tajri min tahti al-anhar. So every ayah in the Quran al-Kareem has tajri min tahti al-anhar in those qira'ats. And also it's found scribed min in some Mushaf Athaniya and without the min in some others. I'm talking about that, strictly that particular ayah in Surah At-Tawbah. How do you interpret this? Is it a tribal difference? No. Is it a dialect, pronunciation? What is it? It's a variation. It's a harf. Allahu a'lam. Does the meaning change? A little bit. Does the meaning change between sari'u and wasari'u? Yes, a lot. A lot. Actually, the waqf and ibtida even changes. Whether you stop before this ruba' hizb or you start with it changes with whether it's sari'u and wasari'u. This has a big effect on waqf and ibtida, i'rab, and meaning. The sari'u and wasari'u. Yes, yes, a lot to absorb. Okay, so these are the 7 ahruf, according to Ibn al-Jazari's interpretation. And this is what I want you to study and absorb. And while we're going along the history of the Quran, this will be our reference. This is what we're going to use as the spine and the basis of trying to explain what may have been going on at the time of Abu Bakr and Uthman, and later on, inshallah. I want to remind everyone that this is not the only explanation. It's just we're choosing it as the top one because this is what the scholars choose to be the top and most accepted one. There is one second in line that's very popular. You might find a lot of books mentioning it. And again, I don't want to exclude it, but it has some evidence pointing against it. There are some questions it's unable to answer that this explanation does answer. So we're going with this one for now, but we may have time at the end of the course to mention the other one. I don't know if it's the most detailed, but it's the most accepted that has the least issues with it. So it explains a lot of the facts that we know, historical facts that we know of, and explains and gives good explanation and reasoning with very few objections. Or none that I know of, actually. I might learn with you some objections that didn't occur to me before. Now, and it's by Ibn al-Jazari, exactly. Okay. So Ibn al-Jazari now continues. After he lists these 7, he says, you probably noticed I didn't list anything to do with idgham or izhar or ikhfa or the difference in mudud or heavy or light letters. It's not mentioned, right? He says, as for these differences, in the ones I just mentioned, let me read it to you. As for the differences in izhar and idgham, heavy and light, and length of med, all that does not change neither letters nor meanings. It's just, now these are where accents come in. The kind of like when, what word in English would be pronounced like heavily in another state? Like water, I don't know where that's pronounced. And we say water versus water, okay? So it's the same spelling, but one, cabbage, I don't know, I'm not sure, brother, garbage. Oh, it might be pronounced as garbage. Right, like in Boston. Yes. No offense to any Bostonians. I love the Bostonian. I love accents in general. I love Southern accents, Bostonian accents, Canadian accents, actually, and British. All of them are beautiful, all accents, alhamdulillah. May Allah give us knowledge and to get to know each other so we may, inshallah, communicate and learn from each other. So Ibn Jazari considers those accents and not harfs. He says, but if you may insist, so he says that not change neither letters or meaning, and it can fall, for whoever insists, it can fall within the first type. Remember what the first type is, where you have a variation in fatha, dhamma, or kasra that does not affect the meaning? You can say variation in fatha, dhamma, kasra, idhar, idgham, and mudud, all of which do not change the meaning. So he says it can be expanded to include this. Basically, a little bit of articulation that has no effect on meaning or on scribing it. So these are the 7 ahruf. I know this is a lot of information that I'm dumping on your heads. I'm looking at my clock now to see if it's a good time to break. Okay, I think it's a good time to break. Now that it's Adhan Maghrib, I think a minute or two ago. And let me check my Adhan app. 2 minutes ago. So inshallah, it's a good break for us in the DMV area. It's a good break for the class because we just finished the 7 ahruf and we're going to move on now to another topic. So it will give anyone who's not going to be praying, who is not in our area, a time to grab a cup of tea or something and just think about these 7 ahruf, inshallah. We'll come back in 15 minutes, which means let's say it's 8:40, so 8:55, inshallah, is when we will come back, 8:55 Eastern Standard Time. Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Welcome back after, inshallah, not too short of a break and not too long of a break. Okay, I don't see any questions in the chat box, which means, inshallah, everyone has the most basic and important information down about the ahruf. So inshallah, we're ready to move on a little bit to the next step. So in conclusion of these ahruf, if the Quran was revealed in these ahruf, or we can now start maybe calling them, possibly translating them as variations, since we're now choosing the interpretation of Ibn Jazari. So I think the word variation would be acceptable in terms of that's what he talks about. He talks about al-ikhtilaf, which means like a variation.